Cowboy was given a black girl as a cruel joke. She became his happiness. The oil lamp flickered over the worn poker table at Murphy's saloon. Smoke hung thick in the air as cowhands and townspeople pressed closer to watch the game. 5 men sat around the green felt, but only 2 mattered now. Ezekiel Merriweather studied his cards with the same calm he used to gentle wild horses. The quiet cowboy had surprised everyone tonight. His steady hands and honest face had won him more money than he'd seen in months. Across the table, Cyrus Crenshaw's confident smile had long since faded. Crenshaw was known throughout Bitter Creek for his silver tongue and sharp dealing. Land speculation had made him wealthy, but tonight his luck had turned sour. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he counted his remaining chips. The pile looked pathetically small. Zeke laid down 2 pairs and waited. The saloon fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Crenshaw's face darkened as he threw his cards down in disgust. The pot held more money than Zeke made in 3 months of hard riding. Crenshaw reached for his wallet, then stopped. His fingers drummed the table as his mind worked. "Well now, seems I'm a bit short on cash." Crenshaw's voice carried across the quiet room. "But I got something else might interest you." Zeke shifted uncomfortably. He wanted his winnings and to get out of there. Gambling wasn't his nature, but desperation had driven him to the table tonight. His horse had gone lame and he needed money for a new mount. "I got me a colored gal down in San Antonio, real educated type. Can read and write better than most folks in this room." Crenshaw's eyes glittered with malice. "She's worth more than what's in that pot." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Men slapped their knees and elbowed each other. Someone whistled low. Another called out encouragement to take the deal. Zeke's stomach turned. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He glanced around the room at the eager faces surrounding him. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting for his answer. The social pressure pressed down like a physical weight. "I don't know about this, Crenshaw. Come now, Merriweather, a deal's a deal. You won fair and square." Crenshaw leaned back in his chair. "Unless you're too yellow to collect your winnings." The challenge hung in the air. In a place like Bitter Creek, backing down from a wager meant losing respect. Zeke looked at the money on the table, then at the expectant faces around him. His conscience warred with necessity and social expectation. "All right," he said quietly. "One hand for it all." He won. The next morning, Zeke waited by the stagecoach depot with growing dread, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. The stagecoach rolled into Bitter Creek at 9:30, dust swirling behind its wheels. Zeke stood beside the depot, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. His hands trembled slightly as he watched the driver climb down and begin unloading bags. The door opened. A woman stepped out with careful dignity. She was nothing like what the saloon crowd had expected. Her dress was simple but well-maintained, her posture straight and proud. Intelligence sparkled in her dark eyes as she surveyed the small crowd that had gathered to gawk. She carried herself like someone accustomed to respect, not someone who could be owned. "You Merriweather?" The stagecoach driver consulted a piece of paper. Zeke nodded, unable to find his voice. "This here's Tessa Jameson, paid passage from San Antonio." The driver handed over a small traveling bag. "Good luck to you both." Tessa looked directly at Zeke. No fear showed in her expression, only careful assessment. She was taking his measure just as thoroughly as he was taking hers. "I suppose you're my new circumstances," she said quietly. The words hit Zeke like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some broken soul grateful for rescue. This was an educated woman forced into an impossible situation through no fault of her own. "Ma'am, he cleared his throat. "This ain't what I intended." Several townspeople had gathered to witness the spectacle. Mrs. Henderson from the general store whispered behind her hand to her neighbor. 2 cowboys from the Lazy J ranch nudged each other and snickered. Word traveled fast in Bitter Creek. Sheriff Duncan Coughlin emerged from his office across the street. The grizzled lawman had seen 40 years on the frontier and thought he'd witnessed every kind of human folly. He leaned against a post and watched the proceedings with detached interest. Legal or not, It wasn't his concern unless someone caused trouble. "We should get moving," Zeke said. They walked through town toward his small cabin. Tessa maintained her composure despite the stares and whispers that followed them. Children peeked around their mothers' skirts. Men paused their work to watch them pass. The weight of judgment pressed down from every direction. Zeke's cabin sat at the edge of town, modest but clean. He'd built it himself 3 years back when he decided to settle in Bitter Creek. 2 rooms, a small kitchen, and a linta for his horse. "You can have the back room," he said, opening the door. "I'll sleep out here by the stove." Tessa stepped inside and looked around. The cabin was spartanly furnished but tidy. Books sat on a small shelf, more than most cowboys owned. A Bible rested on the kitchen table beside a half-finished letter. "You read," she observed. "Some. My mother insisted on schooling before she passed." "Mine too." Tessa set down her bag, though she had to fight harder for the privilege. The comment hung between them, acknowledging realities neither wanted to discuss directly. Over the following days, their arrangement settled into an uncomfortable routine. Zeke left early for work on the surrounding ranches. Tessa kept to the cabin, emerging only for necessities. But even those brief excursions proved challenging. At Henderson's general store, Mrs. Henderson refused to serve Tessa directly. The woman would only conduct business with Zeke present, speaking to him about Tessa as if she weren't standing right there. Other shopkeepers followed suit. Children began throwing pebbles when Tessa walked to the well. Their parents watched from porches without intervening. Some even smiled. Respectable families crossed to the opposite side of the street when they saw her coming. Conversations stopped when she approached, then resumed in harsh whispers after she passed. The hostility affected Zeke's work as well. Several cowhands at the Morrison Ranch made crude jokes about his housekeeping arrangements. When he didn't laugh along, they grew sullen. The foreman started assigning him jobs that kept him isolated from the other men. At the Lazy J, things were worse. 2 riders quit rather than work alongside him. The remaining hands treated him with barely concealed contempt. One afternoon, Zeke returned home to find Tessa tending to his horse behind the cabin. The mare had developed a severe limp that morning, and Zeke had feared she might need to be put down. But Tessa had the horse's hoof elevated, examining it with practiced hands. She'd located a deep stone wedged near the frog and was working it loose with careful precision. Her movements showed familiarity with animal anatomy. "Easy girl," Tessa murmured to the mare. "This will help." She extracted the stone and cleaned the wound with water and herbs Zeke didn't recognize. Then she applied a poultice and wrapped the hoof with strips of cloth. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Zeke asked. "A good doctor taught me many things." Tessa didn't elaborate, but her tone suggested fond memories. Animals and people aren't so different when it comes to healing. The horse's improvement was dramatic. Within 2 days, the limp disappeared entirely. Word spread through town, as it always did. Meanwhile, Crenshaw's bitterness festered. He'd expected Zeke to be humiliated by the arrangement, to become a laughingstock. Instead, Zeke's quiet dignity in the face of social pressure had earned him a different kind of respect from some quarters. This infuriated Crenshaw. The gambler began frequenting the saloons more often, buying drinks for anyone willing to listen to his complaints. He spoke of unnatural arrangements and questioned what kind of man would treat such a situation with respect rather than dominance. His words found fertile ground in some minds, poisoning the already tense atmosphere. The sickness came with the dawn. Mrs. Patterson found her youngest son burning with fever, his small body racked with violent cramps. By noon, 3 more children showed the same symptoms. The telltale signs were unmistakable to anyone who'd seen cholera before. Dr. Morrison had treated the territory's ailments for 15 years. He'd survived gunshot wounds, broken bones, and difficult births. But the disease that swept through Bitter Creek showed no mercy for experience. Within 48 hours, the town's only physician lay delirious in his own bed. Panic spread faster than the sickness itself. Families barricaded themselves in their homes. The healthy fled toward neighboring settlements, loading wagons with whatever they could carry. Those too poor to leave huddled behind locked doors and prayed. Sheriff Coughlin found himself managing a crisis beyond his expertise. Law and order meant nothing when death stalked the streets. He'd sent riders to Fort Collins begging for medical help, but the nearest doctor was 5 days away. Too far, too late. By the third day, 7 people had died. The youngest was barely 4 years old. Zeke returned from checking on his remaining livestock to find the town transformed. Shuttered windows stared like empty eye sockets from abandoned buildings. The few people still moving kept cloth pressed over their faces and hurried past without acknowledgement. He found Tessa sitting at their kitchen table, staring out the window at the ghost town Bitter Creek had become. "It's cholera," she said without turning around. "I've seen this before." Something in her voice made Zeke pause. Not fear, but recognition. The tone of someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. "People are dying," he said. "More will die without proper treatment." Tessa stood and began pacing the small room. Her composed mask had slipped, revealing an inner turmoil. The symptoms progressed predictably. First the fever and cramping, then severe dehydration. Most die within days without intervention. "You sound like you know medicine." Tessa stopped pacing. For a long moment, she studied Zeke's face, weighing some internal decision. "I do know medicine." The admission hung between them like a revelation. A desperate pounding on the door interrupted whatever might have come next. Sheriff Coughlin stood on the threshold, his weathered face etched with exhaustion and despair. "Merriweather, I need help." His voice cracked slightly. "Lost 3 more today. The Henderson baby won't last the night without someone who knows healing." His eyes shifted to Tessa, then back to Zeke. Pride warred with necessity in his expression. "Heard tell your woman knows about horses and such. Animals, people, sickness works the same sometimes." Tessa stepped forward. "I can help." Coughlin's jaw tightened. Accepting aid from her would shatter every social convention he'd upheld for decades. But children were dying. "What would you need?" "Clean water, lots of it. Willow bark if you can find any. Salt, sugar. Clean cloth for bandages." Tessa's voice grew stronger with each word. "And somewhere to treat people properly. The church is empty. Preacher fled yesterday." "That will work." As they prepared to leave, Tessa finally shared what she'd kept hidden. "Dr. Samuel Hartwell trained me." The name meant nothing to Zeke, but she spoke it with reverence. "In San Antonio. He was my father's employer, but more than that. He saw potential where others saw only a stable hand's daughter." She gathered supplies as she spoke, her movements efficient and purposeful. "Dr. Hartwell had no children of his own. For 12 years, from the time I was 8 until I turned 20, he taught me everything he knew. Anatomy, surgery, medicine preparation, childbirth, disease treatment." Why would he do that? Because he believed knowledge shouldn't die with him. Because he thought healing was more important than convention. Tessa tied her hair back with practiced motions. "He secretly trained several freed slaves. Said the world needed more healers, regardless of their color." They reached the church to find several desperate families already waiting. The building that had recently echoed with hymns now served as a makeshift hospital. Tessa surveyed the space with clinical efficiency. "We'll need separate areas for different stages of illness. Clean water source away from waste. Ventilation to prevent spread." She moved among the sick with confidence that surprised everyone present. Her hands were gentle but sure as she examined patients, asked questions, assessed symptoms. "This woman needs immediate rehydration. Mix salt and sugar in clean water, small sips every few minutes." She demonstrated the technique to a worried husband. "This child has progressed further. We need to control the fever first." Zeke watched her transformation with amazement. This was who Tessa truly was beneath the social constraints that had defined her since arriving in Bitter Creek. Not someone's property or problem, but a healer with knowledge that could save lives. "You mentioned seeing cholera before," he said during a brief quiet moment. "San Antonio, 1869. Worse outbreak than this one. Dr. Hartwell and I treated over 200 patients in 6 weeks. Her hands never stopped moving as she prepared medicine. Lost too many, but we saved more than we lost. What do you need from me? Tessa looked up, surprised by the question. In her experience, men typically told her what to do, not asked how they could help. Organization, supplies. Someone people will listen to when I tell them what needs doing. You got it. Word spread quickly that the church had become a treatment center. Some families came desperately seeking help. Others stayed away, suspicious of Tessa's methods or unwilling to trust their lives to her care. But as the first patients began showing improvement, attitudes started shifting. The makeshift hospital needed organization that only military experience could provide. Zeke studied the chaos of desperate families, inadequate supplies, and overwhelming need. Something clicked in his mind, muscle memory from years he rarely discussed. We need separate areas, he announced. New patients here, recovering there, supplies in the back. Tessa glanced up from treating a feverish child. She'd expected resistance to her medical authority, not this systematic support. You sound like you've done this before. Army logistics. Different war, same principles. Zeke began directing the transformation of the church space with quiet efficiency. He'd learned organization under fire during the conflict that split the nation. 3 years as a Union supply sergeant had taught him how to coordinate resources when lives depended on it. He positioned the sickest patients near the altar where Tessa could monitor them closely. Recovery beds lined the side walls where families could tend their improving loved ones. A supply station occupied the back corner, stocked with clean water, medicines, and food for helpers. Tom Bradley, you and your boys bring water from the clean well behind the schoolhouse. Zeke's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Mrs. Patterson, organize the women who want to help. We need people washing hands constantly, boiling water, preparing food. His military background revealed itself in small details. The way he established clear pathways through the space to prevent contamination. How he organized supplies for quick access during emergencies. The systematic approach to tracking which patients needed what treatment when. During the war, I coordinated medical supply deliveries to field hospitals, he explained while setting up a triage area. Saw enough doctors work to understand the basics. How to stop bleeding, set bones, assist during surgery. You never mentioned military service. Most folks around here fought for the other side. Easier to keep quiet about it. Tessa worked with renewed energy knowing someone understood the medical process. When she called for specific supplies, Zeke anticipated her needs. When patients required immediate attention, he managed the waiting families with calm authority. The Henderson baby, who'd been near death when they started, began showing signs of improvement. Her fever broke on the second day. Her mother wept with relief as the child took her first solid food in nearly a week. Word of their success spread through the remaining population. More families arrived seeking help. Some came reluctantly, prejudice warring with desperation. Others arrived grateful for any chance at survival. Sheriff Coughlin became a frequent presence, initially checking for trouble but staying to help. The crisis had stripped away social pretenses, revealing character beneath convention. He found himself respecting both Tessa's medical skill and Zeke's organizational leadership. Never seen anything like it, he admitted while helping carry supplies. You two work like you've been partners for years. But not everyone appreciated their efforts. Crenshaw appeared at the church on the fourth day, his usual polished appearance disheveled from drinking. He surveyed the organized treatment center with obvious displeasure. Interesting setup you got here, he said loud enough for nearby families to hear. Letting her play doctor with your children. Several people looked up nervously. Doubt crept across faces that had been filled with hope moments before. She saved 6 lives already, Zeke replied quietly. Has she? Or just delayed the inevitable? Crenshaw's voice carried the practiced manipulation of a professional gambler. Mighty convenient, this sickness showing up just when she needs to prove her worth. Tessa's hands stilled over her current patient. The accusation hit like a physical blow. "That's enough." Sheriff Coughlin stepped forward. Days of witnessing Tessa's dedication had changed his perspective completely. "This woman's been working around the clock saving people. I won't have you spreading poison in my town." "Your town?" Crenshaw laughed bitterly. "Half the population's fled or dead, some success." The confrontation drew attention from throughout the church. Families stopped their activities to listen. The tension threatened to undermine everything Tessa and Zeke had accomplished. "People are getting better," Mrs. Patterson spoke up unexpectedly. Her youngest son was among those showing improvement. "My boy was dying 3 days ago. Now look at him." Other voices joined hers. Parents whose children had survived. Husbands whose wives had recovered. The testimonies came hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Crenshaw's expression darkened as he realized his manipulation was failing. These people had witnessed Tessa's healing work firsthand. Their gratitude outweighed their prejudices. "This isn't over," he muttered, then left. By the end of the first week, the crisis had clearly turned. New cases slowed to a trickle. Recovery rates exceeded anything they'd hoped for. The church that had been filled with desperation now hummed with quiet hope. Zeke found himself changed by the experience. For years, he drifted from job to job, never finding real purpose. Now he discovered something worth dedicating himself to. Helping Tessa heal people gave his life meaning beyond mere survival. Tessa noticed the change in him. The quiet cowboy had revealed unexpected depths during the crisis. His organizational skills and natural leadership had made her medical knowledge far more effective than it could have been alone. "We make a good team," she said during a brief rest. "Better than I expected when this started." Late at night, when the patients slept and volunteers had gone home, they would sit together planning the next day's treatments. Two people who'd been thrown together by cruelty had found something neither had expected. But Zeke had begun noticing troubling details about how the outbreak started. Questions that needed answers before the crisis truly ended. The pattern bothered Zeke more each day. Cholera didn't strike randomly like lightning or wildfire. It followed water sources, trade routes, places where infected materials gathered. But Bitter Creek's outbreak had started in scattered locations with no obvious connection. He'd learned enough about disease during the war to recognize inconsistencies. The first cases appeared simultaneously in 3 different neighborhoods. No shared well, no common gathering place, no logical explanation for the spread pattern. While Tessa treated the remaining patients, Zeke began investigating quietly. He visited the homes where the sickness first appeared, asking careful questions about anything unusual in the days before people fell ill. At the Patterson house, he found the answer. "Strangest thing," Mrs. Patterson said while folding laundry her recovered son had soiled during his illness. "Day before Billy took sick, someone left a bundle of blankets on our porch. No note, nothing. Figured it was charity from the church. What happened to those blankets? Used them that very night. Billy complained they smelled funny, but we were grateful for the warmth." Zeke felt ice form in his stomach. "Anyone else get blankets like that?" The Hendersons mentioned something similar. The Morrison family too. 3 families, 3 bundles of blankets, 3 locations where cholera first appeared. Zeke rode hard to the Henderson place. Mrs. Henderson confirmed the story. Anonymous blankets had appeared on her porch the day before her baby fell ill. She'd washed them, used them, thought nothing of mysterious charity until now. The Morrison Ranch told the same story. Blankets, no explanation. Sickness following within hours. Someone had deliberately infected Bitter Creek. Zeke's investigation led him to the freight office where all shipments into town were recorded. The clerk, grateful that his own family had survived thanks to Tessa's treatment, showed Zeke the delivery records without question. 3 entries caught his attention. Anonymous packages delivered to specific addresses on the same day. Paid for in cash by someone who hadn't left a name, but the handwriting on the delivery forms looked familiar. Zeke had seen that precise script before. on IOUs, on gambling debts, on the deed transfers Crenshaw used in his land speculation business. That evening, Zeke confronted Crenshaw outside Murphy's saloon. The gambler emerged unsteady from drinking, his usual polish completely gone. "Interesting coincidence," Zeke said quietly. "Blankets showing up just before folks got sick." Crenshaw's eyes sharpened despite the alcohol. "Don't know what you're talking about. Freight office keeps good records. Amazing what you can learn when people are grateful you saved their children." "You can't prove anything." "Can't I?" Zeke pulled out a folded paper. "Delivery receipt, your handwriting, payment records showing cash transactions same day blankets arrived." Crenshaw's face went white, then red with fury. "So what if I did? This town needed shaking up. Too comfortable, too set in its ways." His voice slurred with drink and desperation. "You think I wanted to spend my life in this backwater? I had plans, big plans. Plans that required people to die, plans that required people to leave." Crenshaw swayed slightly. "Buy up properties cheap when folks fled. Sell to the railroad when they came through next year. Simple business. Except Tessa stopped your epidemic." The name brought fresh rage to Crenshaw's face. His entire scheme had collapsed because of her medical knowledge. Instead of mass death and exodus, Bitter Creek had pulled together and survived. Shouldn't have been possible. No doctor for hundreds of miles. People should have died or run. He laughed bitterly. "Then your property shows up knowing more medicine than most real doctors. She saved this town. She ruined everything." Crenshaw's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. Even drunk, he wasn't fool enough to draw on someone in the middle of town. Zeke walked away, leaving Crenshaw swaying outside the saloon. The next morning, Zeke brought his evidence to Sheriff Coughlin. The lawman studied the papers with growing disgust. His transformation during the crisis was complete. The man who'd once enforced social conventions without question now saw justice in clearer terms. "This is enough to hang him," Coughlin said finally. "Will you arrest him?" "Already sent deputies to bring him in, but he's gone, cleared out sometime during the night." Word of Crenshaw's guilt spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire. The revelation that their crisis had been manufactured for profit shocked even those who'd remained suspicious of Tessa's methods. But Crenshaw had one final card to play. He returned 2 days later with a small group of armed men from neighboring towns. Men who knew nothing of Tessa's healing work or Zeke's investigation. Men who'd been told that Bitter Creek was harboring dangerous criminals. "That woman brought disease to your town," Crenshaw announced from horseback in the main street. "Used witchcraft and poison to make herself look like a healer, and that man helped her do it." Several townspeople emerged from buildings, confused by the accusations. The strangers with Crenshaw looked ready for violence, convinced they were confronting dangerous criminals. "She saved us," Mrs. Patterson called out. "Lies," Crenshaw shouted back. "She caused the sickness, then pretended to cure it. Classic con game, you've all been fooled." The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Armed strangers believed they faced criminals. Townspeople knew they faced their saviors. Sheriff Coughlin stood in the middle, his hand resting on his gun. The town's choice would determine everything. Sheriff Coughlin stepped forward, his weathered face calm despite the tension crackling through the street. The armed strangers shifted nervously, hands hovering near their weapons. Crenshaw sat his horse with desperate confidence, believing his final gambit would succeed. "Boys, you've been misinformed," Coughlin said clearly. "This man here is the criminal. Got proof he deliberately spread disease in my town." "He's lying," Crenshaw snarled. "They're all under her spell. Can't you see what's happened here?" Tom Bradley emerged from his shop, his young son beside him. The boy who'd nearly died now stood healthy and strong. "This woman saved my child's life, worked day and night when he was dying." Mrs. Henderson appeared in her doorway, her baby in her arms. The infant gurgled happily, showing no sign of the illness that had nearly claimed her. "My daughter would be dead without Tessa's care." More voices joined the chorus. Parents whose children had survived. Spouses whose partners had recovered. Neighbors who'd witnessed the tireless healing work firsthand. Look around you, Sheriff Coughlin addressed the armed strangers. Do these look like people who have been harmed? Or people who have been saved? Doubt crept across the faces of Crenshaw's hired men. They'd expected to find a terrorized population. Instead, they saw grateful families defending their healers. Show them the evidence, Zeke said quietly. Coughlin pulled out the freight receipts and delivery records. This man paid to have infected blankets delivered to specific homes, started the outbreak for his own profit. The lead stranger studied the papers. His expression hardened as he understood the implications. You telling us this fellow used us to cover up murder? Mass murder, Coughlin confirmed. Would have succeeded too if not for these two. Crenshaw's desperation boiled over. You can't believe them over me. I'm a respectable businessman. They're nothing but a broken-down cowboy and his property. The words rang hollow against the mountain of evidence and testimony. Even his hired men began backing away, unwilling to associate with someone who'd poison an entire town for money. Cyrus Crenshaw, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and public endangerment, Sheriff Coughlin announced. Crenshaw reached for his gun. 3 of his own men drew faster, unwilling to let him make them accessories to more violence. The would-be land speculator found himself looking down multiple barrels. Don't make this worse, the lead stranger advised. You've dug a deep enough hole already. The arrest happened without gunfire. Crenshaw's grand scheme collapsed as completely as his cholera plot had failed. Within an hour, he was locked in the town jail awaiting trial. That evening, the town council convened an emergency meeting. The crisis had changed Bitter Creek's leadership as much as its people. Men who'd once enforced rigid social hierarchies now faced new realities. We need a permanent medical practitioner, Councilman Morrison announced. Someone who knows healing and has proven themselves under pressure. I nominate Tessa Jameson, Sheriff Coughlin said without hesitation. Best qualified person in 300 miles. The vote was unanimous. Zeke found himself appointed as deputy sheriff and medical assistant. His organizational skills and natural authority had impressed everyone during the crisis. The town needed leaders who could handle emergencies with competence and courage. 3 months later, Bitter Creek looked like a different place. The church had been converted permanently into a medical clinic. Tessa's practice thrived as word spread throughout the territory. People traveled days for treatment from the skilled healer who'd stopped a cholera epidemic. She'd started a small medical school, teaching basic health care to local women. Knowledge that had once been restricted now spread freely to anyone willing to learn. Zeke managed the clinic's operations and served as deputy sheriff. His military experience proved invaluable for both roles. The quiet cowboy had found his true calling in service to others. The integration happened gradually, but inevitably. Children who'd been saved by Tessa's medicine didn't see color in their healer, only caring hands that had eased their pain. Their parents followed suit. Murphy's saloon still hosted poker games, but the cruel laughter had been replaced by respectful conversation. The same room where Tessa's fate had been decided as a joke now welcomed her as an honored member of the community. 6 months after Crenshaw's arrest, Bitter Creek celebrated its first integrated harvest festival. Families of all backgrounds shared food, music, and stories. The divisions that had once seemed permanent proved temporary when faced with shared humanity. Tessa and Zeke sat on the clinic porch, watching children play together in the street. The cruel joke that had brought them together had become the foundation of genuine happiness and community transformation. Never imagined it would turn out like this, Zeke said. The best outcomes rarely match our expectations, Tessa replied. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, new families were arriving to settle in a town known throughout the territory for its medical care and welcoming spirit. Bitter Creek had found its soul through crisis and emerged stronger. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.